Yes, your beer. Janice. I sound like I'm in charge, but I'm really not. I just know a lot of people, so I'm saying hi to them as they show up. So
I need you at all my meetings, Dale. It's actually nice to have someone personally welcome you and instead of just seeing a bunch of black screens.
I agree. That's why I have my camera on. I like it that way.
Dale, since you have your backyard, I had to put my motorcycle in the background.
I like that too. And that's your pond behind you, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. No, that's out near East Texas area, out in the hill country. Beautiful out there.
All right. Well, that looks good. I do like your bike, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's one of those foreign-made Harley Davidsons, right?
Hey, I wouldn't mind it if it got a little bit better gas mileage. I'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You get a Harley, you get what you get.
That's it.
Hey, Colin.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Are you in charge?
I hope not.
Oh, okay.
I think Russ is going to be on here in just a sec. I think he'll get it started.
Yeah.
I was going to have Russ do all of my introductions for me, but Dale, I might just let you take the lead if he's any later.
No, I'm not going to be the leader. I sent out invitations, and I don't see nearly enough people on here yet.
Yeah.
See, Lucina's connecting. Drug companies are well represented. Hey, Art, who are you representing now?
On this issue, I'm still working with Gaspar, GSK.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, then there's two of you. We're surrounded.
Well, we may have Kim try to sneak up behind you where you can't see.
Oh, boy. Then we will be in trouble. I see Debbie's on. Hi, Debbie.
Hey, how are you, Dale?
I'm good.
Good.
You got... Hi, Sharon. Haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for the information on that protocol issue.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to see what I can do, too.
Okay. Yeah, I'm afraid it's not going to go the way I'd like it to. Say hi to Julie as well. I see Julie has joined.
Hey, Dale.
How are you? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, too. You're looking great.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. If you do have additional questions,
It's definitely great to have you back in state here.
Well, I'm happy. I'm so happy to be back.
And you're working for a good guy, too. So you worked with Russ before, though, right?
Yeah. Actually, I was his boss.
Okay. All right. So you just swapped.
Yep.
Hello, Dr. Massaro. Good to see you, too. Haven't seen you since the session.
That's right. We've been, I think, busy separately.
Definitely busy. And Art, Julie, whoever's in charge here, when you want me to stop talking, I'll just mute. Let me know. I'm just greeting everybody for you.
Okay. We will. We'll let you know.
All right. Hey, Legina, did you hear me say hello a while ago?
Hi, Dale. Yes, good to see you.
Good to see you. And I think I said hi to Debbie, but I'm not sure. I can't actually. Okay.
Yes.
Trying to say hi to everybody. I know most everybody who's on here at this point, I think.
Hey everyone, I just got off the phone with Superintendent Toll, and he was having some trouble getting in to the Zoom, but he said he'll be on in just a second.
Testing.
Ellen, I like your picture.
Thank you. Most original I could think of.
Yeah, it fits right in. It's southwestern, right here in New Mexico. So I see them from my house all the time. They're not quite that colorful.
And otherwise you'd have to look at me at home.
Well, you get to look at me at home, so I guess that's okay.
My apologies for being late. I had trouble getting in for some reason. And it kept showing me when I did get in that I was the only person in the meeting. So I apologize for that. But I do want to thank everybody who's on the call. This program, as you know, was a priority of the legislature. Senate Bill 1 zoomed through both houses in a near unanimous vote in both places. Governor signed it quickly, and we, meaning the committee that's charged with making this a reality, has been meeting on it since July. Some of you may know that we have asked the carriers for information about their drugs and their highest cost drugs, their net cost drugs, and a number of other things. I'm pleased to be able to tell you that they all responded timely, that we got the information that we needed, and we're trying to work our way through that. As we're going to talk about here, there's a number of state agencies that are involved in this. The lead agency is the Department of Health. And on our call today, we have representatives of DOH, from Human Services Department, from General Services Department. I'm hoping Sharan is on from the Board of Pharmacy. And short of this introduction, I'm going to ask the folks from DOH, Courtney Lovato, who is the head pharmacist and who some of you may well know, to walk us through these slides. And then Dr. Tom Massaro, who's the medical director for DOH, is going to take the lead on many of the questions. In addition, our group can contract with 2 consultants or consultant firms that have a long track record in pharmaceutical pricing and Medicaid and all the rest of that. One is Ben England and Associates out of the DC area, nationally recognized as an expert, as is Jane Horvath. And Jane is someone that I have worked with for a long, long time, probably longer than either. But from way back in the Medicaid days. Jane also has worked with the Interagency Pharmaceutical Purchasing Group Committee over the past few months and prepared a number of reports to them. I think, Dale, you know Jane and have heard her presentations and can speak to her capabilities as well. So in the middle of this presentation, we're going to ask Jane to speak to some of the slides. But I do want to underscore that this is really an opportunity for us to hear from you. We are charged with putting together a draft plan and releasing that for public comment on the 27th of this month. And we'll go over that timetable in more detail here. But to better inform what that draft plan needs to look like, we really need input from those of you who are on the front line, and those of you who have an interest in making sure that this program can work, and as we have all discussed internally, not create unnecessary or unwelcome barriers for participation. Yesterday we had a lengthy session with the health insurance carriers and some of their PBMs. And on Friday, we're hearing from the advocate community and other interested folks, such as Health Action New Mexico, AARP, and Center for Law and Poverty, and many others. So that we hear from all 3 legs of the stool as we go about trying to draft up this plan for release on the 27th. So again, I want to thank you for participating in this. I know we didn't give you a lot of notice, and I know for some of you this time may not be the most convenient, but we really do value your input and want to know whatever issues or concerns or questions you may have. And I want to end by noting, as I've said many times in Medicaid, there are no stupid questions when it comes to such things. We welcome all questions, all comments, all criticisms. Your voice needs to be really heard clearly as we put this plan together. So with that, let me turn over the slide presentation to Courtney Lovato, as I said, the head pharmacist for DOH, and I would note an all-around good egg. So Courtney.
Thank you, Superintendent Toll. And Jane, when you are ready to step in and comment on the slides for your section. But I'll go ahead and do a brief overview of Senate Bill 1 to start off with, and then we'll look at the federal landscape. So the goal of Senate Bill 1 was to provide safe, effective, and more affordable medications. And I really want to emphasize safe, effective, and more affordable medications from other countries. And the idea is to pass along that savings to the consumer. The types of medications that are included in Senate Bill 1 would include high-cost medications, but there are some federal exclusions. We're not able to do biologics or controlled substances that are imported. We can't do parenteral medications. So there are some exclusions that are outlined in the federal requirements. There are there are safeguards for safety and efficacy. We're required to meet all of the FDA labeling standards. We're required to meet the DSCSA standards, so that's the Drug Supply Chain and Security Act, and every other safeguard that is in place both on a state and federal level for this plan. In addition, our drug importation program will be required to complete audits on a regular basis to ensure program compliance and to ensure that not only are we providing safe and efficacious medication, but that we're also providing medications that are cost effective. There are safeguards built into the bill that would shut down the program should we not be producing cost savings for New Mexicans. The Senate Bill 1 does leave us open to importing medications from Canada and other countries as authorized by the FDA. Currently, the only country that the FDA has authorized is Canada. Populations that may benefit from importation of these medications include individuals with private insurance, state employees, and institutional purchasers, our taxpayers, and our uninsured. As Russ mentioned, this is staffed by Department of Health, but we have on our advisory committee, Board of Pharmacy, the Office of the Superintendent, HSD, our General Service Division, so that we're making sure to come up with a comprehensive plan. The supply chain will mimic the existing flow. Currently, most of our drugs are manufactured outside of the United States, and they're actually imported into the United States through legal means. But through this program, it is going to go through the Canadian supplier to a New Mexico wholesaler, who will then distribute the medications that have been imported to pharmacies, clinics, and then to patients. The timetable for the Senate Bill 1 proposal has been difficult with COVID, but we've been working on this very early in the process. So from July to October 26th, we have been obtaining claims data from carriers and working on creating a written plan. And then our proposal is actually going to be posted on October 27th. We will be accepting written comments that can be submitted to the Department of Health anytime from October 27th through December 2nd, which on December 2nd, we will have a public hearing. And then on December 15th, we will submit the plan for federal approval as required by Senate Bill 1. And within 6 months of receiving federal approval, New Mexico will begin implementation of our program. As outlined, we will begin implementation of our program within 6 months. The Senate Bill 1 outlines the requirements that we will have to address upon implementation. There are a lot of reporting requirements, and we're also following the federal rule that was released now in September. A wholesale drug importation fund will be created as a non-reverting fund in the state treasury to ensure that the program is self-funded. And Department of Health, as I mentioned, will submit an annual report to the governor and to the legislature regarding the operation and the impact of the program, specifically in terms of cost savings to New Mexicans. So that was a brief overview of Senate Bill 1. The federal law currently does not allow importation of medications into the U.S. except for very small quantities for personal use. The FDA does not enforce importation laws on drugs when they have less than 90 tablets on them. Additionally, the federal government is now allowing importation of drugs from Canada by wholesalers and pharmacies under Section 804 if it is safe and we can guarantee consumer savings. As I did mention before, there are some drug exclusions, including biologics, parenteral medications, controlled substances. And although Senate Bill 1 allows us the ability to import from other countries, currently federal law allows us to only import through Canada. And as it was mentioned earlier, about 70% of the U.S. supply is already imported by manufacturers. And so that really forms the basis of the fact that forms the basis that the global supply chain is secure, and that we have the mechanisms on a federal level to ensure tracking and tracing of these medications.
Courtney, this is Russ. We probably want Jane to walk through these next couple of slides.
I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jane. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, I think I am. Can you hear me?
Perfect. We hear you. Go ahead.
All right, great. Thanks. Let me get rid of something. Yeah, so thank you, Courtney, very much. And a lot of what Courtney said tracks with this, so I'm going to be as concise as possible here. So we had the federal rule, the proposed rule in December of last year, and a final rule quickly, just 9 months later, which is, I think, faster than many people expected. So, and it's important to keep in mind that SB 1 was enacted into law really before we had rules. Nobody knew when the final rules were going to be coming out. So there are some other requirements in the federal rules relative to SB 1. So the feds have decided that a program of wholesale importation can exist if it is overseen by state government. Basically, you can't be just a wholesaler running the program or pharmacies importing. And what is going to be imported under the federal rules are pharmaceuticals that are licensed and labeled for the market in Canada. So this is not a situation of mail order pass through Canada drugs from some other market. These are licensed and labeled for Canadian markets. Per the regs, not the federal rule and not SB 1, each state is limited to one foreign seller, so one Canadian wholesaler, one supplier for all of the products that a state might want to import. Also, the rules limit, there's going to be no bulk quantity importation according to the rules. The extent to which a drug coming in from Canada can be repackaged, the reg anticipates that it can only really be repackaged once. So that is something to be considered as we move forward. In the federal law and the rule require batch testing. In the reg, it will be after New Mexico has purchased the drugs, after the drugs have crossed the border and are in customs. That's when the testing happens, and if the testing is okay, that's where the relabeling happens as well. So none of that is going to be happening in Canada. According to the rule, it's a phased federal approval process of a state program. Basically, you have to spell out everything except for who your foreign seller is in order to get a preliminary or conditional approval of your application. And then you have 6 months to find a foreign seller in Canada. And the rules require that the manufacturers provide certain data and records to the state program so that the drugs can be relabeled properly. And a lot of people are wondering exactly how that might work. And there is in the rule a lot of flexibility, or a considerable amount of flexibility, to calculate consumer savings, which I think is very helpful. Next one, Colin. Colin?
Well, and I think Courtney's actually controlling it. Courtney, can you move it over to the next slide?
I apologize, Courtney. So one more, there we go. So in terms of like the schematic of how this thing would work, it's envisioned that the Canadian price, or something close to the Canadian price with a certain level of markup through the system, but that price is traveling through the supply chain. This is not a rebate-based program where rebates go to pharmacies or insurers. It's not the U.S. model at this point. The lower price travels through the supply chain to the point of service at the pharmacy counter or in the doctor's office, depending on the product. The imported price should be publicly available, so that particularly people who are uninsured can know what to expect when they go to the pharmacy and are considering paying for these products. And also the carriers will know what to pay, and which means it's the basis of claims payment. And the imported price should also be the basis of the insured's cost sharing and other out-of-pocket costs, like in the deductible or move to a more accessible tier. These things have to be worked out, but that would be sort of important to proving to the federal government that there are consumer cost savings here. And I think only prescription drugs where the Canadian price is better than the insurer carrier's net prices are going to be the drugs to be imported. Next one, Courtney. I mentioned before, but anyway, the imports are tested before distribution to consumers and providers in New Mexico. The imports are going to be relabeled up at the border on the U.S. side, while in customs, they're going to be relabeled to FDA specifications. They're going to carry a U.S. label, essentially, with a new NDC, where New Mexico is going to be the private label manufacturer of these products. So they'll be the labeler of record. And the imports, a lot of states have considered, and I think it's in the New Mexico legislation too, that there should be every attempt for the new imports to stay inside New Mexico. There's supply issues around that. There's for added safety assurance in case there's a problem, being able to quickly recall a product. But there's many reasons to try to keep it in the geography of New Mexico. And no one should anticipate any U.S. manufacturer rebates on imported products. That's come up a couple times. I think that is not the case, because the U.S. manufacturers are not on the label of these products. Next one, Courtney. So other states have taken all different approaches, but New Mexico may want to start slow, like 30 products to start, because it is going to be complicated, and trying to find a set of products where there is net savings to payers and there's going to be demonstrable consumer savings. That's not just fast and easy to figure out, at least initially. And the imports can replace the U.S. product in New Mexico if the carriers and everyone opts into program participation. And I think why that is important and has been important in other states as a principle is because otherwise pharmacies have to double stock products. I hope we can talk a lot more about that with you all today. I think 340B products will continue to be less costly than the Canadian market, although I'm not certain of that. 340B entities will probably want to stock the U.S. version as a result, but then that's on them in terms of their stocking capabilities. And then in order for savings to really be had here, I think 340B entities might be limited to billing only up to the imported price, basically, as opposed to the U.S. market price for the product. Next one, Courtney. Oh, that's it for me.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the work that you've done and the help you've given us. At this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Massaro to go over some of the questions that we put together, but of course, we don't mean for these to be all-inclusive. If you have questions, concerns, criticisms, comments, whatever there may be, you need to just speak up, if you will. Tom? Tom, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions that we should go to from both Courtney and Jane's presentation before we introduce the questions that we've put together? How about background? Is the background perfectly clear? Everyone who wants to ask question is off mute, and I hear none. Okay.
Oh, hi. Sorry, my name is Joelle Walker, and I'm here kind of representing Canada's 42,000 pharmacists, and I'm here sort of in my capacity as their Vice President of Public Affairs from the Canadian Pharmacists Association. And if it's all right with the group, I thought maybe I'd intervene here a little bit. And I will be very brief and always happy to take questions at a later time if needed. So first of all, I wanted to say that we're extremely sympathetic to some of the issues that you're facing in terms of healthcare costs and efforts that you've been making to provide affordable medications to your constituents and your patients. This is something that we also face here in Canada and that we continue to work on domestically on an ongoing basis. I thought maybe I'd just provide a little bit of context. And again, I'll be very brief, but Canada's a really small country compared to the United States. Our population is about 36 million people. And it also means that we only represent about, 2% of the global pharmaceutical markets. Most of our drugs aren't manufactured in Canada. And I think similarly to what Courtney mentioned in her presentation, most of our medications are imported from other countries. And I'm saying all this because I think that sort of context makes us more vulnerable as a country to drug shortages. And just to give you a sense of how prevalent they are in Canada, about 1 in 4 Canadians have said that they or a family member or a friend have experienced a drug shortage, which is a really high percentage for us. And I say that stat is actually pre-COVID. And it's also, and COVID's put a lot of pressure on our drug supply. So I know that my pharmacist colleagues in the US and New Mexico can appreciate how hard it is for our members to manage that on a day-to-day basis. So pharmacists in Canada, along with sort of other groups, have expressed some concerns with these programs that aim to import medications from Canada, mostly out of a fear that we're not going to be able to supply our own patients, let alone a country of about 10 times our size. I wanted to bring up the fact that the vast majority of our wholesalers in Canada have sort of pledged not to participate in such programs, and that's in order to protect Canadians and our drug supply. And that's to sort of underscore for me as you're working through this process in your program, that it sort of opens up an element of risk to both American pharmacists and patients who, when you're dealing with groups that may be operating in a bit of a gray market, because in the vast majority, as I mentioned, of wholesalers in Canada have said that they won't participate. So I'll sort of leave you with this, that, we absolutely appreciate the difficulties that you face. We would strongly urge you to think a little bit about reconsider this program to import drugs from Canada. It really would be devastating to Canadians, and I think would put some New Mexico pharmacists and patients at risk. So I'll leave you with that. I'm again very happy to take questions. I know it's a very popular program, and I know one that you're really trying to work through to make sure that it works for your state. I'm happy to talk, and I know my consulate in the U.S. would be also happy to speak to you as this as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity just to address this group.
Thank you for being on the call and for your input. I want to note for the record that we're not trying to import for the entire United States. There are only about 2.3 million people in all of New Mexico. So we are a much smaller program than Florida, Pennsylvania, Colorado, choose your state. And as to your question as to rethinking, I can assure you appreciate the fact that this is not something that we have a choice in the matter. The legislature has passed this bill. They've told us to explore it. That doesn't mean that 6 or 9 months down the road that we actually implement. But we have to at least explore it, and the law requires us to submit a proposal to the federal government. So I hear the concerns. I understand the concerns, but we don't have the luxury of saying, well, we've heard from Canada, so now we're going to backdoor this thing and put it on the bench. We have to press forward and try to find a way that it might work for New Mexico. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Thanks, and I just want to, I appreciate that, and certainly do appreciate the opportunity just to talk a little bit about some of the logistical challenges that this might present, and again, happy to answer any questions as you work through this proposal.
Thank you. That is very helpful. Tom?
Yes, if I can speak to those comments as well. I mean, I look at the Canadian importation as perhaps getting the nose of the camel in the tent. If we were able to import from the global market, the European Union, other places, the supply issues that you mentioned wouldn't be nearly as challenging. Germany, Switzerland, as you know, England, many other countries have large pharmaceutical supply chains. And the benefit, one of the benefits I see of this program is that it shows the public and states are willing to act aggressively to try to bring down pharmaceutical costs in the United States. And we may have to look in a number of different ways and different approaches to this. But I think it's important that the FDA, Washington, understands that the states are struggling and that solutions really have to be brought forward. Alternate solutions are welcome, but right now, as Russ said, we are under legislative pressure to finish this by December 15th. But the signal clearly has to be not that we want to cause any harm to our Canadian friends or colleagues, but that we will do whatever, we will explore whatever options might be out there to lower pharmaceutical costs for our citizens.
And Tom, if I may, you're exactly right that this is certainly not going to be the only thing that's explored to try to make pharmaceutical costs more reasonable in the United States. I think the legislature, as I said, almost unanimously made it very clear they are tired of the United States underwriting drug costs for the entire rest of the world. And, so I think you're going to see more legislation this coming session. I think you're going to see more efforts to try to control costs. Is that what she said? And also make sure we do it in a way that the community pharmacists do not get squeezed. Now, whether we can pull that all off, I don't know, but that is certainly going to be a goal. And it would be wonderful if pharma would step to the table and recognize the situation they've put everybody in. But we'll have to wait and see if that epiphany arises.
Why don't we go from the global to the local and begin a discussion of how this might impact the community pharmacists in New Mexico and what we in the advisory board might do to make it work as well as it can for the community pharmacists. The first question we have that we thought might be a good opener for you, how might we determine pharmacy dispensing fees for these imports? How does the setting of dispensing fees make it possible for you to be supportive of this approach?
Dr. Massaro, if I can talk to that for just a minute. This is Dale Tinker, Director of New Mexico Pharmacists Association. And there are some pharmacists on here that might address it better than I could, but I would like to comment that in the last legislative session, there was a memorial passed to require Medicaid to do a cost of dispensing study. And whether the drugs are imported from Canada or not, the cost to dispense is going to be relatively the same. The amount of time the pharmacist puts in, patient education, those kind of things, are going to be relatively the same. And so we would encourage a look at that cost of dispensing and what's required for that. We're not anywhere near that in reality in this state. The studies that have been done have shown that the cost of dispensing is well over $10 per prescription, and that won't change whether that's the drugs are imported from Canada or through a regular United States wholesale company. But I can tell you most of the dispensing fees for programs in New Mexico are significantly below that. And so we would like to see some kind of studies done in that regard. And as I've mentioned before, New Mexico has lost a lot of pharmacies in the last few years because they couldn't financially survive. One of my concerns about importing drugs from Canada really is not that it won't work, but that it might work. And that is that once you are able to import some drugs from Canada, the MCOs will still be managing patient care. And so the PBMs will still be managing reimbursement mechanisms of some sort. And so if they use Canadian drugs as the MAC price, and then they're not available 100% of the time, that can be really devastating to a pharmacy, I would say. And so that's a concern. So anyway, just to bring you up to date with that, the pharmacy dispensing fees are not adequate currently for New Mexicans and for New Mexico pharmacies. So we would like it if the committee looked at that more carefully and implemented a mechanism that would be more fair to businesses in New Mexico.
Is it fair to ask who sets the dispensing fees today?
Yeah, the pharmacy benefit managers set them. They determine what they're going to pay in a dispensing fee. In theory, the pharmacies contract through a PSAO, which is a Pharmacy Services Administration organization. And those PSAOs contract with the PBMs at a set rate. So if they agree to a dispensing fee, then the pharmacies are contractually agreeing to that as well. The only way out of that is to drop the company they're working through. But the reality is if you do that, you have no patients left. An example of that is Presbyterian Healthcare. They do pretty much about 50%, close to 50% of Medicaid patients in New Mexico. So no pharmacy is going to survive if they drop doing business with Presbyterian. Their drugs are managed through Optum, which is their PBM. And while, we submit complaints all the time to press for underpayment, we do that for all the PBMs because they're all kind of in the same place largely. And Lugina, I'll say that Blue Cross does a better job than most of the others. That's just to make that clear, but it's still really not adequate for pharmacy reimbursement. But it is established by the PBMs. Pharmacies do not have a choice. The contracts are pretty much take it or leave it. If they leave it, they are effectively out of business.
Well, if the PBMs are in control, what mechanisms could we in the importation program use to give back some of the control to the pharmacists in our communities?
I'm not sure. I guess if I knew how to answer that, we would have solved this years ago, but that's a tough one. And, we
might be a more willing partner.
Oh, absolutely. I think you would be a more willing partner, but you're still probably going to contract with a PBM to manage the program, I assume, to manage the reimbursement structure. If it's for state employees right now, that's Express Scripts that manages the drug reimbursement program. And their dispensing fees are horrible. So it's a continuing struggle with that. We have talked, OSI knows those issues. We have worked with the OSI on our legislative process to regulate PBMs a little bit. That's been a struggle. It's been very difficult. We had a hearing last January, and the regulations are not implemented because of, I don't know if it's because of waiting for the federal lawsuit to get resolved that's in the Supreme Court. I don't know what the answer to that is.
That answer is yes, Dale.
That's kind of what I thought, Russ.
Yeah.
So we won't know. We won't have that answer. They had oral arguments last week, and we won't hear the result of that until sometime between now and the end of June. So it could be, another 8 or 9 months before we know the result of that, potentially. So anyway, it's something we need to talk about and address, and we're certainly willing to do that and have that conversation. But that is a concern for us.
You mentioned in your comment that we should consider some studies to evaluate the appropriateness and fairness of dispensing fees. Can you say a little bit more about what studies might be helpful?
Well, the studies are not done in New Mexico at this point. There was a memorial passed to have Medicaid do a cost of dispensing study. We have discussed that with Carrie Armijo at HSD, and as you know, everybody's budgets are shattered under the current state structure. Everybody's funding is shattered, and so there is not funding through HSD to accomplish that cost of dispensing study. Right now, the Medicaid fee-for-service uses, I'm pretty sure it's I don't know if it's Nevada or Utah, one of those states, cost of dispensing studies. And they're closer than other reimbursement, I have to say. But we would like them to do an in-state study. We've estimated that will cost something less than $100,000. But Medicaid has made it clear they don't have an extra $100,000. So they're not implementing that at this point. So we don't expect that cost of dispensing study to move forward anytime soon.
Okay, well, thank you for those insights. Are there any comments to Dale's concerns or other comments regarding dispensing fees and how the imported drugs might help with that challenge?
Hi, Dale. This is Teresa Ware from Medicine Chest Pharmacy. I work for Medicine Chest, and I've been doing, I would have to say, disputes in regards to dispensing fees from the big PBMs. I understand how there's no funds to provide these studies, but I think that it is so important that the money is found, because in doing my job, in doing this job for the past 19 years, we actually had a case that went all the way before the committee because of a claim that Presbyterian Optum were not paying us correctly, and on a claim for buprenorphine naloxone. Anyway, in the process of doing research, I found out that they reimbursed us significantly less than they charged Presbyterian. So I really believe these studies would be of great value, a great way to save money for the state of New Mexico, because they are reimbursing us one amount and they're charging the state of New Mexico another amount, and there is a significant difference. And I actually have all the paperwork from that case, and you're welcome, Dale, to get information from me so that you can research that case, because it did go before, but evidently at that time we did not follow the proper steps in order to get issues resolved. Currently, another problem is there was and I just sent a letter to, let me get some of my paperwork. There was a directive.
Teresa, if I can interrupt just a second. I can't get that information from you. I would not be allowed to have it. And so I would mention Dr. Massaro might be able to, or Russ. I'm sure that Russell Toll could probably look at it. But it's not something you want to give to me. Just to be clear about that.
They can get my contact information from you.
They can.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to look at it, Dale.
Okay.
So currently we have a letter of directive that was given in regards to the big PBMs paying us according to NADAC, which was, NADAC is through CMS. What they do is they get all of the pricing from across the United States, and they come up with a fair pricing on a generic drug. Currently, Optum Health and Western Centennial are not paying us according to NADAC on several drugs. This is an issue that have been plaguing our state for years that I have addressed over and over and over again. And the big PBMs are pretty much like Dale said. It's a contract, and they're saying that you're paying according to your contract. Now, when I go to my PSAO, the people who handle our contracts in regards to this particular issue, they say you have to take it up to the state. But I'm just really glad that these conversations are being had, because the big PBMs are really, really having a very widespread on the money that they are making, as opposed to what they're reimbursing pharmacies for the claims that we process, especially for our Medicaid. But it's happening through workman's comp. It's happening through the commercial. It's just really happening across the board.
Okay, I think we'll certainly follow up to try to get that information that you shared. I know that we are all committed to making this as positive an experience for our community pharmacists as we possibly can. The legislature was very clear to us during the legislative process. Well, the second question talks a little bit about the background in which you are functioning. Can you help us a little bit about how you're supplied? Do you deal with regional distributors, the big three national distributors? What's the breakdown of your businesses? Does it vary from location, urban, rural? Does it vary private versus large chains? Those sorts of things.
Are you addressing that to me?
No, there are 32 people in the audience, and probably all 32 know a little more than I do. And so it would be very good to hear about the business arrangements that you all live under. And there's the third question is the same sort of thing. What tie-in arrangements with suppliers are a challenge for you?
Doctor, I'll start with the question number 2. Teresa might be better to answer 3, but on 2, there are three major wholesalers. Mm-hmm. Every company will have one primary wholesaler, and then they may have some secondary smaller wholesalers to pick up a little bit. They pretty much have a requirement to buy 90% of their product from one wholesaler. So if they have Cardinal, then they've got to buy 90%. if something's missing, then they can buy from some other distributor. Might be ANDA. There's one called ANDA. There's probably others. Yeah, so there's other companies, but mostly every pharmacy will have one major contract. That wholesaler is the owner of the PSAO, just so you know that chain of process. In the case of Amerisource Bergen, they own, Teresa, you can probably answer this.
Elevate. Yes, sir.
Is that the Good Neighbor Pharmacy one?
Yeah, well, it's called Elevate now, but it was formerly called GNPPN. But yeah, it's Elevate. Okay. McKesson has Health, Atlas Health. Cardinal has LeaderNet.
Okay, thanks, Tim. And so that's the distribution. Every pharmacy in the state. Now for chains, it might be a little different because they have their own warehouses sometimes. I think Walgreens might have their own warehouse, and so, but that's a national distribution contract structure that I am not familiar with. So if somebody else can answer that, that'd be great.
Mr. Cooper, do you have more on this question?
Well, Dale kind of topped it all off there with in regards to the chain. If anyone hears from the chains at all, each of them have their own PSAO. Like CVS has their own, Walgreens has their own. And honestly, I'm not too sure about Walmart. So, but that's how the national works. But as Dale and Teresa have added there, each independent pharmacy in New Mexico has to deal with a certain PSAO of their choosing, and it can vary from the wholesalers. But there are some other PSAOs, example PPOK out of Oklahoma, and there's Epic, and there's so many other ones that are not part of a national distributor. So there's a lot of elements to this business, as people know already. So I think that's all I can add at that part.
Are there any other comments relating to the second or the third question about in effect, the backroom operation of your pharmacies? Okay, hearing none. What about tie-in arrangements with the current suppliers?
Well, you know what? I'll put in my 2 cents on that thought. As Dale said, with the national distributors, whether it's McKesson, Cardinal, or AmerisourceBergen, under their contract, they've got to buy 90% plus or minus on that of their supplies through them when they deal directly with one of those companies. So maybe, and again, I'm not an expert at all of this, but that might come into play, be a problem if certain drugs start to funnel in from another supplier other than out of their distribution center. So, it might affect some of the numbers that some of the independents get back on rebates on generics and things like that. So
I would mention that 90% could become problematic if there is any significant amount of importation that affects those numbers, because they would not then be buying through their wholesaler contract, and they may drop below the 90%, in which case their contract would be in jeopardy.
And also, this is Teresa again from Medicine Chest, and one of the things over the years that I've struggled with and has been such a forefront in how the PBMs say they reimburse us, some of the things have to do with the rebates that they give us. Well, the rebates that we receive totally do not offset the money that we lose on claims each day as we process them. And being in this business for 19 years, I'm seeing it happen more and more. When I first started in this business, it was, let's see, the TRICARE. Our dispensing fee for TRICARE was $5. I believe we might be down to 25 cents to what our dispensing fee, and that's the fee that we get to process a claim. So in over the years, I've been like, well, let's get rid of our dispensing fees. I mean, because if they are not our rebates, because if they're hurting us so much, but in my conversations with those in the state, those rebates also turn around and help with our Medicaid, with our with that portion. So in those discussions, those rebates, not only that we get, but that somehow the state's also filtering in on those. I mean, it's just one big pool of my hand is touching your hand and our hand is touching that hand. And so, I mean, it's just a huge, huge problem that has been going on for years. When I first started in this business, Ken literally hired me, and the only thing I did was come in. I was a stay-at-home mom. He was my pharmacist. I'd come in, he'd have a sheet of claims that didn't get paid correctly according to his cost or according to what he purchased the drug. I literally would come in 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, call each of these PBMs and let them know that they weren't reimbursing us correctly. And then occasionally I would have to send in a one of our purchasing statements occasionally. And a couple of days later, they'd call us back and they'd say, rerun the claim. When our PSAOs, or when the big, our PSAOs like McKesson and Cardinal, when they started signing our contract, all of those liberties for us to challenge those big PBMs for reimbursement or correct reimbursement were taken away from us. Right now, there is a way that we, again, these were, I believe, Dale, can you refresh my mind on the HB? Is it HB something where they have so many days to let us know that we make a claim that they didn't pay us correctly, and then they have so many days before they address the appeal of a drug not being paid correctly. I believe it's 14 days. I can't think of the House bill. But currently...
Teresa, what you're talking about is the PBM statute, and that's what I was talking about with Russell earlier, that the OSI had a public hearing about regulations for the PBM requirements. It is in statute, so it is current law, and I don't remember there are different time frames depending on what we're talking about.
Okay, but it's still not being done in the timely fashion that was supposed to be adhered to.
Okay,
yeah.
It sounds to me like, in effect, you're saying that we need a revolution in this whole business. How can we, in the drug importation program, begin the first step toward change? What might be something that we can do that would be a significant benefit for you without having to bring about a revolution, which we're really not prepared for, whether we might support or not intellectually? How can we help in the areas where we might have some control?
Dr. Massaro, I think having the opportunity to develop reimbursement requirements for anybody participating in this importation program, so that it doesn't affect that 90% supply, and that the dispensing and reimbursement fees are fair to pharmacies. And I think the program can write those rules. I know Jane is very familiar with all those things, and so can provide some input in that regard. It's not an easy process. We have been working trying to develop the PBM stuff. We passed our first bill in 2014. So 6 years that we've got it passed, but we were working on those issues long before that. And since we weren't able to resolve them, that's how we ended up in the legislature with it. So I can say it's not going to be an easy process, but making sure that it's reasonable one that pharmacies can not be hurt by is going to be critical.
Were you in effect saying that we have to develop a parallel supply process that doesn't really impact on the current one from the PBMs? Will they allow that?
Yeah, they won't allow that. I mean, I don't think that will happen. But I guess I'm expressing our concern that will impact how pharmacies are able to do business. I do think it's just going to be very difficult. Actually, I see Lugina's unmuted. Looks like she's wanting to say something. She is with a PBM, so she might be able to speak to that a little bit.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lugina. I'm a pharmacist, and apologize for not participating yesterday during the PBM insurer call, but I had another obligation with the boards of pharmacy that took me away from the meeting yesterday. But couple questions, or well, just a question I have, because I had never even contemplated how importation would affect the contractual requirements that pharmacies have to use their primary wholesaler. And it's been a while since I worked in a dispensing pharmacy. Can you guys share with us how does, like, let's say Lugina's pharmacy and I work with McKesson, how does McKesson know that I've purchased drugs from another wholesaler, or in the case of importation, how do they know that's happening?
This is Teresa again, because we have to run reports. Periodically, they actually have us run reports, and then just with drug information, there's no personal healthcare information, but just the drug, the NDC, the quantity, and then we run those reports. We send them off not only to our primary wholesaler, but usually a primary wholesaler has an under wholesaler. So ours is IPC, and they actually pull those reports too. And so we send those to them, and then they can see on the medication we're dispensing as opposed to the medication we're purchasing from them. So let's say I'm getting a lot of medication, or let's say I'm ordering more because I can get a drug so much cheaper from, somebody said, who did they say? Parmed. Let's say Parmed has a drug that's so much cheaper. If I purchase it from them as opposed to my primary, they'll see that in the numbers that I am of those medications or those drugs that I am purchasing from my primary. Okay. They'll say, "Oh, look." Yeah.
They also compare it to historical records, and then they can audit. There are, as PBMs can, PBM audits are starting to require chain of custody reports, I believe. I don't know if that's something that's come up for you or not, Regina, but I think it's starting to show up. Track and trace is critical. So you're wanting to know that the drugs that you're giving to or that the pharmacy's providing for your patients are appropriately part of the supply chain.
Right. Okay. And Teresa, just one other question, and actually goes to question number 4 that I see that's posed here. When you guys are reporting to your primary wholesaler, your purchasing and information, is it always NDC? And the reason that I'm asking that is I was able to call into at the very end of the insurer call yesterday, and there was some discussion about NDC versus GPI from a billing perspective. So I just want to make certain that I understand. Is that an issue for reporting to your wholesalers?
No, not necessarily, because most of the drugs, the NDC and the GPIs, they link. So yeah. Within my system, like let's say I had a drug, just for instance, carvedilol, and I entered it into my system. It's gonna link, the GPI is gonna link all of that particular strength with the brand name drug. So it's all gonna link up together. So yeah, there's not that much difference.
Okay, good. And then Jane, as far as, and I'm not sure if it was Jane or if it was who I should ask this question to, but when the relabeling happens of the imported drugs, will it be the U.S. NDC, or is it going to be some other NDC that signifies that New Mexico is the labeler? I'm not sure if I'm.
It'll be a standard U.S. NDC, and New Mexico, the first 5 for the labeler will represent New Mexico. New Mexico will be a private label.
Okay, so then I think that's where the issue is coming up, because as Teresa just talked about, and right now the way that Medispan and all of our systems are set up is that NDC number, which is the first 5 is usually the manufacturer. It would not, as opposed to 8, and that's how the GPIs are linked together to the NDCs.
Right. So that's something we definitely have to look at in terms of, and probably talk to Medispan and figure out how that works.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
And this is Teresa again. You know what? That logistic has to be set in stone before we go forward, because if these pharmacy benefit managers, as I process those claims, do not recognize that, they are going to reject the claim.
Right.
Which is going to stop the patient from getting their medications.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that was a discussion point yesterday as well. But again, I had never even contemplated the whole how you have to buy a certain percentage of your drugs from a primary wholesaler. That adds another kind of wrinkle to this. So, I did want to share a little bit of information from a PBM perspective, and make certain that Dr. Massaro and Superintendent Toll have an understanding of the PSAOs. And I think Dale and you guys have done a nice job talking about a PSAO generally is typically used by an independent pharmacy who chooses to contract with the PSAO. Then those PSAOs negotiate with us as PBMs on behalf of however many pharmacies have contracted with them. So they negotiate with us the contracts for providing services. And I think you guys did a really nice job also of pointing out that the wholesalers, the major wholesalers, are the owners of those PSAOs for the most part. A PPOK is different, but for the other 3 big wholesalers, they are there. And then I also wanted to point out, and I want to make sure that I have a clear understanding, Teresa, when you were talking about rebates that the pharmacies get, those are rebates that you get from either the manufacturers or the wholesalers, correct? That's nothing to do with PBM rebates that go directly to pharmacies.
Correct.
Okay.
Tim, you could probably explain that better.
Okay. I just wanted to make certain, because there are rebates in different parts of the supply chain, and I wanted to make certain that I understood the rebates that you were talking about.
So there are rebates so that the PBMs engage in.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, so let's say for instance,
not with pharmacies.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. No,
If I could talk to that, I mean, the rebates that pharmacies get, I think of them more as buying incentives or quantity discounts, those kind of things, because they're really minimal compared to like the 35 million that the state of New Mexico gets in rebates for Medicaid.
Right.
Pharmacies, it's almost an insignificant amount of money, but and what PBMs get, I have no idea. The Medicaid PBMs, I think the state collects those rebates now. I don't think the Medicaid PBMs collect like they used to, at least. There may still be some, I don't know. But rebates are a very, very complicated discussion in that regard.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I just wanted to make certain that I heard, that I understood, because I may have misheard, but I thought Teresa had said that the PBMs were giving rebates to the pharmacies, and I wasn't familiar with that, so.
No, those are drug
can we get
company things.
can we get those PBMs to go ahead and start giving rebates? That would be good.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to mute here. That way I can laugh and not annoy people.
I'm like, we do give rebates to our client.
Look, this is a great conversation. There are 30 participants. Are there other perspectives that will add to this already very informative conversation? Those of you who are out there on the front lines of this, again, we are really committed to helping as much as we can. And so the more we understand the complexities of your businesses, the more it's at least likely that we'll be able to help.
Right now, that's very.
Yeah, they don't.
Dr. Massaro, I would like to point out there's a lot of participants on here that are drug company, manufacturers, representatives. If they have anything to chime in here, they're being pretty quiet generally, but there's a number of them on the line or on this conference.
Well, we're willing to learn from anyone with any background because this is important for us. So please, anyone who wants to put a different shading or a different perspective on the picture that's being shaped. And it would be great if, in addition to describing the complexity, there might be some suggestions of how we can move forward, both to lower the costs of pharmaceuticals to New Mexican citizens, but also to help the business operations of our community pharmacists.
We're all too shy, apparently.
Well, if
not normally that.
If it's a shyness issue, we would welcome written, email, voicemail suggestions that may be addressed to any one of us on this advisory committee. Any thoughts that you have about these issues? I can understand perhaps that you don't want to speak up in a group of 30, but we really welcome the opportunity to hear the perspectives that may come in from any parts of the really complex supply chain.
Tom, this is Russ, and I would just emphasize we're not looking for a love feast here. If part of what we're proposing doesn't make sense or is problematic, or there are things we absolutely need to not do or avoid, then that's the kind of feedback that is really very helpful to us.
Yes.
Don't have the expertise that everybody on this, well, with the possible exception of Courtney, we don't have the expertise that the folks on this call do, but we really do need the input. And that's the reason we set up these stakeholder calls, for folks to have an opportunity to ask questions, raise concerns, or just register
And your generic drugs,
their
right?
criticism if that's what they want to do.
That's going to eat into our.
Courtney, let me turn to you. Anything you want to add to the discussion?
I know, but Tim said it's going to make a difference to us.
No, I thought the dual stocking issue was going to bring up a lot of discussion within the pharmacies, but I feel that we have given a good voice, and I know Teresa was very vocal about her concerns, but I thought we would have heard more about the dual stocking, and I'd like to hear if that would be an issue in terms of your pharmacy operations if we don't get complete plan buy-in. Can you afford to have inventory of both U.S. and imported products?
I can address that if you'd like to some extent, and some others may have some comments. I do think dual stocking will become a problem because, for example, 340B drugs are totally rebate driven. It's totally about the rebates. That's the biggest rebates that folks get. But clinics will often contract with a pharmacy to fill those meds, and then they have a contractual relationship with the pharmacy, either to replace that drug. If the pharmacy dispensed something that's in their inventory, then it'll have to be replaced through a 340B purchase program of some sort. We did have that problem with another example has been the vaccine for children. Most of our pharmacies don't participate in that program, and Courtney is probably familiar with that. They don't participate because it required double inventory, and it required many more regulations about refrigeration of products and sampling, testing the temperature multiple times a day, logging those and that kind of thing. But I think 340B is potentially going to be the biggest issue in terms of requiring double stocking.
Does 340B count against your 90% that you have to buy from your supplier? Or is 340B or vaccine for children, can they be accounted for in different ways?
Honestly, I don't know how that works, Dr. Massaro. Maybe one of the other folks on here can answer that. I know there's well, some of them are not going to be able to because of their corporate, who they work for. And so we're probably not going to get answers out of some. I know there's at least one Walgreens pharmacist on here, but she can't speak for Walgreens. She's a pharmacist, and I don't think that she would be comfortable commenting on that. But I know that they participated in vaccines for children for a period of time, and they ended up dropping out because of the cumbersome nature of dual inventories and regulatory burden of reporting burden and managing those vaccine products. I don't know if they counted against the supplies or not, or the 90% or not.
Hey, Dale,
Yeah.
I can answer that a little bit.
Okay, Tim.
I can tell you over my 20 years dealing with regular accounts and those accounts having a 340B account as a separate account number. Yeah, that 90% was only mainly on their main account number. The 340B account was something totally separate. So the 340B products didn't count towards the 90% under the other account.
So it was a separate tracking and a separate business structure, in effect, it sounds like.
Correct.
Is there a way we can do that with the imported drugs?
No.
Develop a separate parallel business structure.
Well, that might be possible within some, the state, obviously. Yeah, I would think it'd be possible. That way, the three main wholesalers, they probably, of course, I'm kind of talking out of turn here, but won't get myself in trouble, but I'm quite sure they won't like it. But if it's something that's going to help the state, its patients, and the pharmacies, then I don't see why you couldn't figure something out according to that.
Jesus, real radio. It's changing people's lives.
So this is Jane. I think we definitely have to look at the 340B program and the supply chain there. There's a prime vendor involved there, separate prime vendor that negotiates with manufacturers. And I believe the entities either order directly from manufacturers, contractors who handle 340B for them, or order directly from the manufacturers for the quantities that they want. So, but it is a separate system, to my understanding.
And we could work really hard and make this more complicated.
With a little effort.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing this 32 years now, and I've known Julie and Russell and Lugina and most of the folks on this call for that period of time. And nobody I've ever talked to truly understands how complex pharmacy billing and pharmacy purchasing truly is. Except for Lugina. She probably does.
Well, we won't be able to match your 32 years of experience, but we've got to learn a little bit more before we write our final application early in December.
And I would say any way I can help with that, I will.
I've got 46 years in of working on Medicaid issues, so Dale, I certainly can complicate this thing more if necessary.
Yeah. Well, I had about 10 or 12 years of construction industry, and I could add that in there, Russell.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
We've talked about dual talking. We've talked a little bit about NDC. Question number 6 in our remaining conversations. Are there any specific concerns that you have about dispensing imported medications that haven't come up in the first part of these discussions?
Dr. Massaro, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation, but the concerns about contaminating the supply chain with counterfeit drugs and those kind of things, I do have some folks that are concerned about that. We like that the requirement is there for them to be properly approved, not FDA necessarily, but the Canadian system, like the FDA, and the track and trace. So those are definitely important characteristics, and so we would encourage those not to be messed with, so that we can ensure the supply chain is going to remain as secure as possible. But other than that, I can't think of anything right now. I think we've covered those bases, and any other concerns, I can't think of one offhand right now.
Was it brought up that the Canadian Pharmacist Association does not support the FDA allowing importation of their medication because they fear that their drug supply will be disrupted?
Yeah, Hanif, Ms. Walker from Canada addressed that early on, and that was part of the discussion before you got here, before you came in. But yeah, it was brought up, and Superintendent Toll reminded all of us that the legislature passed this as a state law, and they have a requirement to proceed with the process because the legislature passed it and the governor signed it. It is statutory requirement. So we're trying to figure out how to make that work in the best way. Yeah, it was.
Well, I don't think that that in fact is the case. As we read the FDA rules, we have to essentially duplicate the efforts that the American wholesalers go through in bringing the products in to pharmacists.
And I can speak to that a little bit, Russell. Any product that is imported from Canada is required to be FDA tested by an FDA approved and qualified laboratory within the United States. In addition to the FDA testing that is done as it comes into the United States, the foreign seller must provide direct documentation that they received it from the manufacturer. So there is that paper trail that the federal government has built in for us to receive that track and trace information from the Canadian side of the supply chain. And in addition to that paper trail that they've created, they're actually testing the medications as they come into the United States to ensure that only safe and efficacious medication is received.
Maybe just I'm just coming from the Canada perspective. I just wanted to reinforce what Shabir just indicated, which is, well, I think our legitimate supply chain in Canada is safe. There are number of examples where the lack of tracking and tracing, and we don't have that in Canada in the same way that it is in the States, would apply to sort of this program. So. There are examples of medications that can sort of flow through Canada in a number of different ways, and in my other world, I will assure Canadians that our legitimate drug supply system is safe. That there are people and organizations that sort of seek to live around the limits, and that's where it exposes Americans from, of that risk that I sort of mentioned earlier.
Yes, well, I would just note, thank you for that. I agree with you. I want to just note for the record, as I suggested earlier, that we wouldn't have this problem if the farmer prices were not so unreasonable and were not increasing so dramatically on an annual basis. And that is fundamentally the issue that the legislature is trying to deal with. And as I also noted, it's no accident that this passed in overwhelmingly bipartisan manner, because the legislators of both sides of the aisle are tired of having every employer health plan and every insurer and every PBM and everybody else having to absorb these costs that, compared to the costs in the other countries, are indefensible. And while I salute the fact that there is an organization that is concerned about drug safety, the biggest problem that we have, particularly here in New Mexico, is that we have a lot of uninsured people who cannot afford to pay for these drugs at this price. And the irony of it is they're least able, and they're the one population group that gets charged full load, full freight. It's not an acceptable system. And whether this is the right solution or this is just one of the tools in the shed, we will have to see. But we are at least going to do what we can to put together a program that meets all the FDA requirements.
I think that's probably a great way to end this conversation, with an exclamation point. We are committed to really do what we can to make this beneficial to the average New Mexican. But we are certainly open. Any comments that you want to make, any emails you want to send, we value the opportunity to learn more about how we can make this as good as it can be, given the complexity of the environment. Any other comments out there? If there are none.
Follow-up question about, was there a discussion about just using, going about this in just one drug class at a time to kind of test the waters?
It wasn't on one class at a time, but the conversation was that perhaps New Mexico would start slowly with a small number of drugs, develop the experience and build on it. Ms. Horvath provided that in her remarks, yes. Jane, do you want to add to that?
No, I'm sorry. I thought that your answer, that's exactly what, that's the response, really. And it also might be more complicated to focus on one therapeutic class for a host of reasons related to the federal reg that, we can talk about another time, but having one foreign seller and other things may complicate pursuing one class.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
I would like to say thank you, Russell and Dr. Massaro. It's been very informative. I'm sorry that I took up so much time talking, but it's kind of what I do. I represent pharmacists in the association, and so providing that information to you is certainly part of my job, and do the best I can to do that. And I want to express our association's willingness to work with you through this process. The statute says let's do it, so let's try to do it. We want to help you do it the best we can. And so, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wish there had been more pharmacists on here. There weren't a lot, but it was a good conversation in any case. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Dale. We appreciate it. You know, the survival of pharmacies and community pharmacists in particular is a high priority of my office and of this administration. Feel free to share these slides with your colleagues and the association members. And as both Courtney and Dr. Massaro said, if people want to submit written comments, they are most welcome to do so. And they can either send them to either Tom or me here at the Office of Superintendent Insurance. So thanks so much for everybody who participated. This is, as Tom noted, is very helpful to us. And we hope that you will, if you have other comments or questions that you didn't want to pose today, that you'll send those to us. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch. A reminder that we will post on the 27th the draft plan, and you'll have an opportunity to comment on that as well. Take care.
And so the official hearing is December 2nd? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I learned a great deal.
Thank you, Dr. Massaro. Appreciate the opportunity to listen in.
Well, thank you for all your teaching.
Have a good rest of the day.
You all too. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.